Hello and what's up, political peeps and transit enthusiasts alike. I am your host, Kapoor, and your fellow weekly transit yapper. Here on Transit Talk Tuesday, or TTT, we will be, well, it's kind of in the name, discussing everything transit related throughout the world. From transit news and updates to new transit projects, this will truly be a one stop shop for all transit related information. So, today's episode, like many others that will come on this series, will be about New York City's transit system. And although we will discuss systems throughout the world of public transportation, the New York City transit network means a lot to the entire world of transit, given its magnitude, general efficiency, which we'll talk about later compared to other cities throughout the world, and feasibility to use without any other modes of private transportation. So, with New York City having the eighth oldest subway system in the entire world, with elevated lines and buses running in New York City, serving as a public transportation hotspot for the United States for many years before it kind of public transportation kind of became a thing in North America. New York City subway system was established in 1904. And although that is later than a couple other bigger cities such as Chicago, London, and Boston, New York City subway has grown so much bigger than these other ones, coming in now as 472 subway stations, and it's also built other commuter rail networks, and it's also became compatible with other transit networks throughout the region, such as commuter rail networks. We have the Metro North Railroad here in New York, the Long Island Railroad. We have the nice buses running in the suburbs surrounding New York City, as well as the B-Line buses, and then other types of transit are running as well, such as the Roosevelt Island Tram, which is an aerial tramway. We have New York Waterway ferries, etc. So this is really shows the magnitude of New York City's transportation, and given the age of this transportation system, New York City's constantly having to catch up with signal maintenance improvements to maintain the safety of the trains, as well as other electrification work and other things. Because still, some of the branches of New York City's Metropolitan Transportation Authority, or MTA's, commuter rails are not fully electrified. So we're still working on this, climate friendly way to move our people around. So New York City has changed a lot in the past 100, 200 years, since America's founding. And before that, when the Dutch originally settled New York City, and then the British settled New York City, and later on they established the first elevated lines. And during that time, even in the suburbs of New York City, and even in New York City's five boroughs. So if you're less familiar with New York City, I'll try to kind of explain this piece by piece. But New York City has five boroughs: the Bronx, Staten Island, which is kind of disconnected, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. These five boroughs have all kind of grown together and became much more substantial than they were at one point. Previously, in the hundreds of years prior to today, Manhattan has been the hub for everything commercial and business and law, etc. So nothing happened in those four what we call outer boroughs, which are again the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island, besides exclusively farming, some residential settlements, etc. So all transit was coming to Manhattan. So that's why and given that New York City's subway system is so old, running trains from, for example, Queens to Brooklyn, or Brooklyn to the Bronx, or even to Staten Island, which is not connected by any train whatsoever, is almost unheard of. Four outer boroughs are becoming more and more developed, and New Jersey, which also borders New York across the Hudson River, in Jersey City and Atlantic City, in Hoboken and Secaucus, that's also growing so much. Westchester County's growing, Fairfield County's growing, other suburbs in Connecticut and throughout New Jersey are growing so much that our transit lines that only exclusively serve Manhattan and back out to the formerly residential neighborhoods aren't working. So there's this very valuable line in New York City. So New York City has many subway lines now coming from different divisions. One of the most valuable subway lines is the G line, which is a Brooklyn Queens crosstown, which starts down on Church Avenue in Brooklyn and runs all the way up to Court Square in Queens, with connections to the F. We have the AC connections up in J Street Metro Tech, which is in downtown Brooklyn, a highly developed area as of the last 50 years, and then goes all the way up to a very culturally diverse and developing area of Queens, in the Court Square and Queensboro areas, with connections to the 7 train, which go into some of the most culturally diverse and dense neighborhoods in the entire world, up in Jackson Heights, where we have Little India, Little Mexico, etc., Little China, all the way up in Queens. So this connection is truly valuable to the citizens of Brooklyn and Queens, because having that one seat trip between, for example, downtown Brooklyn and Court Square in Queens is good, because people who are living in Court Square right now, or living in other parts of Queens where you can transfer the 7 train to get further into Queens, used to have to, for example, take the M. And the M is a really annoying route. A graphic would be on the screen right now. If you're listening on an audio platform, this would be a good time to switch to video. Tune in on Spotify where there's a video, or you can check out the YouTube, which will be the link in the description if you're on any audio platforms, to see all of the visuals I'll be putting up later on in this episode. So the M train essentially runs a loop. It goes from Queens down back into Brooklyn, over into Manhattan, then comes back into Queens. So everybody in the New York transit community always makes fun of this, that they can walk faster than the M, because the M doesn't loop. The M runs that, and then there's like a short distance between the two terminus points of the M, which are both in the same borough, but you have to loop all the way through Manhattan to get there. So it becomes very hard, and that's why people are drawn more to private transportation, which is inevitably taking and digging into more and more of the population in this country, which is an issue. So, because of that, this crosstown line is so valuable, and they're building more to connect the other boroughs. For example, Staten Island, the only way to get there is either through a bus, which people don't like taking buses in New York City, and to a ferry, which leaves directly from downtown Manhattan, which, although is free and subsidized by New York taxpayer dollars, it just takes a long time. And having a subway network which could connect all 5 boroughs, for example, running from Tompkinsville and connecting the current Staten Island Railway branch, with branches off local and express services, coming up to Brooklyn, into Queens, connection to the 7, connection to the EFMR on QBL, going up towards the Pelham line, possibly going towards the White Plains line, etc., having connections to the 2, 4, 5, and 6 Express in the Bronx, and then coming down and possibly meeting with the Second Avenue subway, which is another project we'll talk about in other TTET episodes coming in the future. 125th Street Crosstown, which is Main Street in Harlem and Upper Manhattan. There's endless possibilities to continue and encourage the growth of these outer boroughs, which has not been highlighted, but is finally being highlighted. So something called CBTC in New York City, communications-based train control, is something that we've been improving and implementing into our trains, and almost all of the commuter rail trains have CBTC. So it's when trains can get closer together while being safe, and there's like an electronic system which can sense where these trains are rather than solely relying on timetables. So we have to leave a little bit more room between trains without CBTC, just for safety reasons. But now with CBTC, we can put more trains, faster speeds, etc., without having as much of a worry concerning safety in the trains, with possible like crashes or other derailments and accidents. So we can kind of avoid that entire step when using CBTC. So because of that, it's being implemented throughout the system and it's being updated. So now on the G, or main crosstown line, for now, which only connects Brooklyn and Queens, but we're getting good, and it has connections to Manhattan via the 7 and L, and we also have connections to the M train, which provides further travel up into the Bronx via the B and D lines if you didn't transfer at 47th, 50th Street to Rockefeller Center. So it is pretty expansive. We're just trying to improve service on that line and possibly expand it using other commuter rail lines and other abandoned rail lines that we could use to make the IBX, or the Interborough Express, which is the ideal solution of connecting the 4 outer boroughs and possibly coming back into Manhattan. So because of this, the value of the G train, where they're implementing CBTC into it, and when I say that's the MTA and all the committees behind that. So the MTA has really been working hard at improving the G trains through the CBTC and other track improvements. So as of June 28th, and all going extending all the way up until September 3rd. So almost the entire summer for us New Yorkers. We have G train service being extremely lowered and cancelled in many parts of the G train in a certain path. So here is a video released by the G train czar on behalf of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, explaining some of the G train service changes that was released back in the end of June, to describe some of these changes and the improvements and how the G line will benefit even despite this long closure.
This summer, we're going to be upgrading your signal system along the Crosstown G line. Hi, my name is Hugo Zamora. I'm the G Train Czar. I'm here to help you navigate these changes. Here are the 5 things you need to know. First, this summer, we are modernizing the signals along the G line. We will be replacing the 1930s era signal with modern communication-based train control. This modern technology will make service on the G line safer, quicker, and more efficient. Secondly, these changes will be in effect from June 28th until September 3rd. Third, service will be operating in 3 phases. During the first phase, which runs from June 28th until July 5th, G-Train service will be replaced by B94 shuttle buses between Court Square and Nassau Avenue. During the second phase, which runs from July 5th until August 12th, G service will be suspended between Court Square and Bedford-Nostrand Avenue. Free B98 shuttle bus service will make all G train stops between Court Square and Bedford-Nostrand Avenues. During Phase 3, which runs from August 12th until September 3rd, G service will be suspended between Bedford-Nostrand Avenues and Church Avenue. Free B93 shuttle bus service will be operating, making G train stops between Bedford-Nostrand Avenues and J Street Metrotech. Customers can get back on the F train at J Street Metrotech for continuing service towards Church Avenue. Fourth, we'd like to minimize the impact of our service change and ensure alternative travel options. The functioning part of the G line will have trains running every 8 minutes during rush hours and every 10 minutes during the day and evening. Free shuttle buses and out-of-system transfers will be provided. Lastly, check our website to learn more about the G-Train service change. You can also download the MTA app for real-time updates and alerts. Thank you for your patience while we modernize our signals to provide more reliable service for the 160,000 customers who take the G-Train every day. Thank you for riding with us.
Yeah, so those changes are going to be definitely great and beneficial to the New York City community. And I don't know if you guys picked that up at the end, but 160,000 people ride the G train a day, which is low-key unfathomable. That's like towns and cities and even some micronations at a time riding the G train every day. So because of that, the CBTC becomes so valuable, but also so disruptive at the same time. But ultimately, with the system, this hundreds of years, almost 200 years old, it's inevitable that we'll have to have these major shutdowns to redo the system piece by piece, so we can keep up with this, 160,000 people demand. So as he mentioned in the video, during phase 1, which lasted from the 28th of June until July 5th, G trains didn't run from the top of the line, Court Square, all the way down to the middle of the line in Nassau Avenue in either direction. So the New York City has been implementing other buses to kind of help with stuff like that. Graphic on screen right now of the G train map, so you can kind of visualize this. Then during phase 2, it was essentially just an expanded phase 1. During phase 2, from the 5th of July until August 11th, which was just a couple of days ago when you guys are seeing this video, when this video was just posted, it was an extension because it still began from Court Square, and our G trains didn't run all the way till Bedford Nostrand, which meant a bunch of stops was skipped, including Court Square, which is a major connection point into Manhattan, having a connection to the EM and 7 trains, 2 and 2-3 transition, which just took place a couple of days ago from when doing this. Where there was a bunch of other service changes, and arguably the biggest service change was phase 3, which lasted from just yesterday, August 12th, to September, and will end on September 3rd. So this will mean that G trains won't run between Bedford Nostrand Avenues and Church Avenue, and that's all the way through downtown Brooklyn. So we're missing some connections to the AC trains, etc., into Manhattan. So that is causing a big deal and will cause a big deal in the next couple of weeks throughout downtown Brooklyn. But the MTA is handling connections and routing F train service properly, since the F and G train, run concurrently all the way through from J Street Metro Tech until Church Avenue. So that is working out fine. Now, speaking of access to the outer boroughs, exclusively and less focus onto specifically connection into Manhattan from the outer boroughs. Metro North Railroad runs via the Westchester County, Putnam County, Dutchess County, and Fairfield County, as well as New Haven County, throughout the north of New York City, and flows all the way in, making a couple stops in the central Bronx and South Bronx, coming into Manhattan, making stops at Harlem 125th Street, which is Main Street in Harlem, and then ultimately Grand Central Terminal, which is at the corner of 42nd Street and Park Avenues in Midtown Manhattan. So this provides a great connection to the millions of people traveling for business every year into Grand Central Terminal and Midtown Manhattan. But ultimately, a further connection to Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx, it has been unavailable for years since the founding of Penn Central. And although Long Island Railroad does have other connections into the rest of the city, it is not as vast as we would like it to be, especially from the northern direction, the Metro North. So there is a new project called Penn Station Access, where we will be routing Metro North trains via Amtrak on the New Haven line to go via Queens, routing through the Bronx to make stops at more developing communities throughout the Eastern Bronx, and make possibly a stop in Brooklyn to run into Penn Station, which is on 34th Street and 8th Avenue, a less served area than the extremely dense and overpopulated eastern half of Manhattan. So here's a video from the Metropolitan Transportation Authority about 3 years ago at the start of the Penn Station Access Project, which, by the way, is still in the works very much. So yeah, Penn Station access will be a very valuable asset, as you can see. If you didn't know, Stamford is a city northeast of New York City, and Stamford is much smaller than New York City, but a major commercial hub with a major transfer point to other regional rail networks, as well as New Haven and Norwalk, similarly, as well as Bridgeport, all on the New Haven line in Connecticut. But as you can see, travel times will be cut down immensely between these eastern Bronx stations and beyond. And there's also a proposed station on Broadway in Queens, which I mentioned is served by the G and is a very valuable asset and growing community in Queens along the QBL, with the transfer of the EFM and R trains and possibly even the 7. So Penn Station access will be very valuable. There's just a couple things we're working on. Number one, the current route is old and only used by Amtrak. So there's many bridges that are crossed throughout the Bronx, for example, the Bronx-Dale Bridge, that need to be refurbished to fit more and more trains going through them. Because again, right now these trains only handle the Amtrak Acela, Northeast Regional, Vermonter, etc. So running this entire new railroad on these Northeast Corridor lines will be a lot to handle for these tracks in their current state. So we're going to have to implement different, newer, and more modern aspects to these tracks to make them able to hold this kind of service on them. Now, in addition to this, we're working on the development of these stations throughout the Bronx to be able to successfully run trains into Penn Station and also get everything set up on the Penn Station front. So we are going to be waiting a couple of years for this, I can definitely say, before we get official New Haven Line trains running into Penn Station. Although I think it would be a valuable asset to connect these Eastern Bronx communities up north to New Haven with the connections, New Rochelle, and all the way up to Danbury. And there's other New Haven line options where we could possibly be seeing a Beacon line connecting Danbury to Southeast. That's the old freight line, which Metro North may reactivate, which would be really, really cool. New Haven line trains running via the newly electrified, I'm crossing my fingers, Danbury branch via Southeast all the way to the Beacon and possibly crossing the Merriam Cuomo Bridge. I know these are completely unrealistic thoughts at this moment, but there is existing infrastructure, and the study did show that the Merriam Cuomo Bridge could allow east of the Hudson trains to connect to west of the Hudson trains. That would be great given the immense traffic on I-287 to kind of just cut around that bridge and go via train, which have their own right of way. Now, in addition to this, Hudson Line trains may be able to run into Penn Station as well by the Empire Connection. Unfortunately, two things come in the way. Number one, the Empire Connection is not electrified, so we will need to electrify that because some of the trains that Metro North's Hudson Line uses are EMUs if they're running to only to Quote and Harmon, which is fully electrified, excluding the Empire Corridor. So these EMUs need electric third rail power. So we would have to electrify that with over or under running third rail. Now, Amtrak exclusively uses overrunning third rail for its terminals because New York City terminals, being Grand Central and Penn Station, only allow electric power into the terminals because otherwise it is a hazard given the smoke and the lack of visibility that can come with that soot coming from the locomotives. So we have to run on electric power going into the New York City terminals. Now, the Penn Station terminal only has overrunning third rail, while all Metro North EMUs use underrunning third rail. So even if the Empire Corridor is electrified and the Empire Connection is electrified down from Quote and Harmon, we would not be able to run into the New York City Penn Station terminal given the different type of third rail unless the new M9 EMUs, which have already started service, in the Metro North, are outfitted with both overrunning and underrunning third rail connection, as well as the P32 ACDMs, which are being phased out right now. Those are used for connection further north where electrification is not possible on the line. But still, those were in the terminal, those since DM means dual mode. So given the dual mode nature of these locomotives, the dual mode part where it becomes electric solely can run on underrunning third rail, which would not comply with the Penn Station guideline of overrunning third rail. So on the new order of locomotives we're getting, that which are the Siemens ACS 64 dual mode locomotives, we would have to be able to outfit them with both over and underrunning third rail, so we can run without damaging infrastructure up to Quote and Harmon, and then also run along the Empire Connection down into the terminal at Penn Station. So ultimately, there's a lot of work to be done on these lines, but this connection to Penn Station would definitely be valuable for East Side riders, similarly to the East Side riders that are seeking connection to the West, similarly how Grand Central Madison saved a lot of riders a lot of time and money rather than the subway ride between the east and west of Manhattan. And with that, thank you so much for watching today's #1 ever episode of Transit Talk Tuesday. I really appreciated you guys tuning in and listening to me yap about public transportation, everything like that. I hope you learned a lot about Manhattan Centricity, Penn Station access, the G train shutdown, and much, much more. And please be sure to subscribe to the Geopolitical here on YouTube or wherever you are listening, because we will have more interviews coming to Transit Talk Tuesday. And I can promise you some of them will be really good, including a possible interview with the very high ranking Metro North official, which may be coming to you guys in the coming weeks. So, with that, peace out, transit enthusiasts.